Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and I'm here to do yet another audiobook recommendations video. This time I'm talking about thrillers. And if you've missed my previous videos, I'll have them linked in the cards in the description. Basically, I've done numerous ones for science fiction, fantasy, and horror, so you can go check those out. But today, specifically, I want to talk about thriller books that work best when you listen to them. These are books that I honestly just enjoyed, but I felt like I enjoyed them more because I got that audiobook experience. And so if you, like myself, cannot get enough of that format and are always looking for more books to try out, hopefully I have some good recommendations here. All that being said, let's get started. First, let's talk about The Night Swim by Megan Golden. This is a thriller told over two timelines that follows a podcaster who is investigating and reporting on a sex assault trial in the present day. And then there are also flashbacks to a woman who drowned in the past. It was believed to be an accident, but her sister thinks that there was more going on. And so she reaches out to the podcaster to hopefully get her to investigate what happened. The two timelines, of course, eventually intersect, and the story goes from there. But the reason I want to recommend the audio version is first and foremost because of the podcast angle. So between the different chapters, you get little segments of the podcast, and they do a really good job. It doesn't feel overproduced, but it really does feel like you're listening to a podcast, or at least a segment of it. So if you're a fan of things like Serial, you will definitely get pulled into the narrative. I also like that they include multiple narrators so that you have different women voicing the different characters, and it's just done very well. So highly recommend the audiobook experience because you really will feel like it's a real podcast, like it's a real trial case, and I just got sucked into the story that way. Next, I cannot get through a video talking about my favorite audiobook thrillers without mentioning one of my all-time favorites, and that of course is You by Carolyn Kepnes, which I think everyone knows thanks to the TV show, but that of course follows a man named Joe who is stalking and obsessed with a woman named Bex. He works in a bookstore and becomes obsessed with her and wants to date her and make her fall in love with him. And this is a book that I like to recommend the audiobook version because it took a thriller that I really enjoyed, and I do think that it became a favorite because of the audiobook performance. If you didn't know, the story is told in second person perspective, so you did this, you went there, and because of that, you get the whole story narrated from Joe, this sociopathic man, and the narrator does such a fantastic job. His voice is suave and sexy and dangerous, and he's so snarky. You get a lot of his personality, a lot of the humor comes out in that performance, and it's just very creepy having this man whisper into your ear about watching this woman through her window, and I just found it to be a very thrilling experience. And I mean, I think most people know about it, but if for some reason you like thrillers and you have not tried the audiobook version of this, you really need to. It's just fantastic. And again, takes a good book and makes it even more amazing. Next, I want to recommend Jane Doe by Victoria Helen Stone. And this is a book that was recommended to me by a friend because I knew how much I liked the previous book I mentioned, You. And so they thought that this book had some similarities, especially in the audiobook narration. So they recommended me this one. This follows a woman who decides to take revenge on her best friend. Her best friend was previously dating this man, and things just went terribly wrong, and she ended up committing suicide. And Jane, the main character, blames her friend's death on this man because she feels that while he may not have actually murdered her, he was this controlling man who just caused her friend to spiral downwards and commit suicide. And so she really wants to get revenge on him and bring him down. And so that's the premise of it. The reason that this book is sometimes compared to You is that it's told from the perspective of Jane Doe, who is not perhaps truly a sociopath, but she is very cold and for the most part fairly emotionless, especially for a female protagonist. And you just get to watch as she puts on this act and pretends to be this other person, this meek and mild person, as she weaves herself into the life of this man, and eventually they do become romantically involved and the story spirals. I definitely do not think it is as strong as You, but in terms of a performance, it was very well done, and again, one that I think you will like like it even more if you get a chance to do the audio. The narrator was just a really strong female voice and really brought a lot to the character of Jane. So again, one that I highly recommend you check out for yourself. It was just a lot of fun and enjoyable for sure. I always love a good sociopathic woman. After that, I want to recommend Dare Me by Megan Abbott, and this is the only young adult thriller on this list. I really do try to keep my channel predominantly focused on adult books, but this is one that I think has enough crossover that I want to recommend it here. This follows a group of cheerleaders that get a new coach. They become obsessed with this coach and want to be like her. They admire her, and their coach is not quite perfect. She parties with them and kind of lets them get away with more than they should, but eventually the one cheerleader gets entwined with the coach in something terrible that happens, and from there they have to figure out how to get themselves out of it and how to keep something a secret. I don't want to give away too much in case you don't know much about it. Of course, this is another one that was popularized by the Netflix TV show, but I really do think that the original story is well worth reading, and if you're going to read it, I highly recommend the audiobook version. The reason for that is that Megan Abbott is one of my favorite writers in terms of her prose. She just has this style that is so specific to her. It's concise and sharp, and I don't think I would have picked up on it if it was something that I just read as a physical book, but because it was narrated to me and it was narrated very well, I really think the audiobook narrator basically put on a performance that really highlighted the structure and periods and punctuation of her writing. And it's just such a tight little book, and it's smart and gripping, and the cheerleaders are just ferocious. So even though this is technically young adult, I really would recommend it to an adult audience. I don't read a lot of YA anymore, but this one totally holds up. It's brutal, it's sharp, and again is one that just demands that audio experience because it just highlights everything I love so much about the book. And yeah, would love you to read it. Next, I want to talk about My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing, which follows a suburban couple that decide to spice up their marriage by planning and committing various murders. And this is one that I just want to recommend because I felt that it was very well produced. It is told from the husband's perspective, and you have a really good male narrator walking you through the story. It had some really good twists and turns I did not see coming. And this is one that honestly, there wasn't a lot of frills. There wasn't anything particularly fancy about the story itself in terms of the audiobook production, but it was just very well done. And I remember distinctly being so sucked into the story that I just did not want to stop listening, and I just binge listened to the last several chapters because I wanted to know what was going to happen. And for me, that's always a good sign of a really good thriller audiobook. Finally, I want to end by recommending Winter Count by David Heska Wadley Whedon. And this is one that is more of a straightforward thriller as opposed to most of the other ones I'm recommending here were more psychological thrillers. This is just a straight up action thriller that is told from the perspective of a man living on Indigenous reserve in the States, and he basically functions as the informal enforcer of the law. In this place, people get away with a lot of injustice because the police really do not go ahead and prosecute a lot of the crimes that are committed. So in response, this man just takes justice into his own hands, and the story specifically follows him as his young nephew who lives with him overdoses on drugs, and so he gets pulled into a mystery of who is bringing drugs onto the native reserve. And so that takes him to travel to another city, start tracking down people. And this is a story that again is a thriller because it has some really good action scenes. But what I loved so much about it is the fact that it really gives you insight into life on an Indigenous reserve. I thought that it really highlighted the complexities of the culture and the communities, and I thought that it was just incredibly well done. To the best of my knowledge, the narrator is an Indigenous person himself, and I really think that that helped because of course this is an Own Voices story, and told in an Own Voices narration really brought the story to life. And I just found myself gripped in. I knew where the story was going. It wasn't necessarily something that surprised me, but it was very engaging, and I really do attribute the fantastic narration to part of that. So highly recommend it. Great book no matter how you read it, but if you can, try to track down the audiobook version because it was absolutely gripping. I was completely immersed and would definitely recommend this one. So that is it for this video. Don't forget to check out my other audiobook recommendation videos if you're looking for even more things to put in your ears. In the meantime, I would also love for you to recommend me your favorite thriller books that work really well in audio, because maybe you can add to my own TBR. If I have enough recommendations, I would love to do a follow-up video to this. If you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I do read a lot of thrillers, science fiction, fantasy, and of course horror. And you can help me out by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it around online, and hitting that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.